Steinbeck once wrote something along the lines of, "No man really knows about UFOs. The best he can do is suppose that they are like himself." What he meant by that, and I happen to agree with him, is that believing UFOs are vehicles for little man-shaped aliens is such a terrestrial human concept that it seems far-fetched. Unfortunately, UFOs and aliens are nearly synonymous terms to most people, and I say unfortunately because I believe that presuming UFOs are extraterrestrial makes them a lot easier to prematurely dismiss. Nothing about the following case suggests that the phenomena witnessed was an extraterrestrial craft, so I recommend putting that notion out of your mind while you listen. Judge this story on its own merits, and I think you'll come to the same conclusion that I have, that this is a compelling case. Welcome to Invisible Night School.
Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and yes, aloha. Welcome wherever you are at around the world to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name's Luis Jimenez. Welcome back to the show. If this is your first time here, please subscribe. Think about it. Give it a shot. Who knows? You may like us. You may not. Either way, it's all in your control. But we do appreciate it. We're like 50 subscribers away from 9,000 subscribers, which is insane. Insane. On the road to 10,000. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all the tunes you hear on the show. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. So go check them out. Those sultry tones that you heard at the beginning of the show is from our guest today, Mr. Nick Coffin. But before we get to him, gotta remind you guys, the show will be available on iTunes. No matter the content, no matter how long, you can check out the entire archive. I recommend YouTube. It's got every single episode that we've done. There was a rough patch there for a little bit. I'm sorry. Where I just didn't have the room to upload all the shows I was doing. And the show was changing very quickly. So if you want the entire archive, just go to YouTube. It's free. We do have ways to support the show, though. If you can, we've got a Patreon. Consider checking it out. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support the show. We are a public access channel. We're supported by viewers like you, so we truly appreciate it. There are also super chats if you got a burning question or just want to be cool. And we've also got our YouTube membership, which we've got 12 members, I think, 12 or 13 members now. So, all right, you guys, welcome to the YouTube UCR membership. We truly appreciate you guys. Want to say thank you to the moderators in the chat here. We've got links, not only for everything UCR, including merch, but we've got links for our co-hosts, who, by the way, is Mr. Rather Be Squidding. Rather, what's shaking?
Not too much. Hey, Lou.
Hey, buddy, you ready for the weekend?
Yeah, it's been a long week. Yes, I am.
yeah, I feel it. I feel it has been a very long week. It's one of the longest weeks of this new year.
Lots going on.
Check out Rather's link. He's got videos popping all the time on his channel, Rather Be Squidding. That's why his name is Rather Be Squidding. And what else, Rather? Am I missing anything? Want to say thank you to KGRADB, our producer, Bill, behind the scenes. Thank you, Bill, for being a beautiful man and always helping out on Fridays where we stream our show.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you mention DOS Tapes? Catherine Splashington is requesting them to play at her funeral, which hopefully doesn't come up anytime soon.
Yeah, well, I'll put in the request and hopefully, knock on some wood that Kathleen doesn't need to call in on that request anytime soon. But sure, yeah, we'll see what we can do. So Rather, this is going to be a fun day because we've talked about the UFO, the 1994 Michigan UFO wave with Jazz Shaw. He did a breakdown on it. And then, in that conversation, we had brought up our guest today. And I was like, embarrassingly, I'm like, I hadn't watched all his videos. And I remember watching, I think, one or two of them at that point, and I thought they were really cool. The thing about amateur filmmakers is sometimes they try to get too creative and they try to get too cute with things. Nick's little I'd like to call on mini documentaries and sort of breakdown of this one event. We're gonna pick his brain about it. But the thing I loved about it is they're so cool. They're so simple, and they're easy to understand, and they've got some really compelling conversations that happened between not only 911 and all the calls that were coming into the dispatch while people were seeing this thing, but also between the 911 dispatcher and the National Weather Office in Muscogee. I'm gonna mess this up. It's just not my part of the world here.
We'll wait for the expert.
We'll wait for the expert to get these very northern Wisconsin, Minnesota names out of, because I will absolutely butcher it. So on that note, without further ado, let us bring on former skeptical essayist and current independent researcher and occasional content creator, Mr. Nick Coffin. Nick, how are you, sir?
Great. How are you?
For being on the show.
My pleasure.
Awesome, man. Well, so let's start, I guess, with former skeptical essayist.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit before. Yeah. Starting, I want to say it was back in 2010, 2011. I met up with a couple other like-minded skeptics on Unsolved Mysteries Forum. And we went back and forth. We're like, oh, we want to create some content and kind of bridge this gap between skeptics and believers, these two archetypes that always seem to be combating. And so we decided to do it. It was a digital magazine that was also offered in print. It was called The Bent Spoon. And we'd cover all sorts of paranormal topics, not just UFOs. So we'd do, cryptozoology, ghosts, parapsychology, things of that nature. And it ran to about 2015, I believe. It's all archived. What's his name? Jason Coy, I think, on UFO Twitter, has a massive periodical archive. And they are in there if anyone wants to see them. I'm a little embarrassed by them now, but it's all right. I was a pretty angsty debunker back then. And I was too cynical, I think, by the end of that. And I needed to take a break. And I stepped away from all of the paranormal fields for maybe a good 5 years before I decided to return to them with fresh eyes. And the first case I looked at was this 94 Holland, Michigan case. And I thought it was really compelling. So it kind of, it gave me a different perspective. And now I try to look at things a bit more objectively, always reserve my judgment instead of kind of jumping to conclusions and working with my own biases. Because everybody should reflect on their own biases at any chance they get. It's always a good thing. And that's what I did, and that's what brought me here now.
Yeah, what drew you to that Michigan case? I had never heard of it before listening to some of your documentaries.
Right, yeah, it doesn't get much coverage, despite how compelling I think it is. Over the pandemic, I was working remotely. I was talking online with some friends, and that kind of convinced me to do a UFO podcast before I realized how many there were. But
I was like, room for one more, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could listen to your sweet, soothing voice. I mean, who knows? We've got a lot of them. Here's the thing: I think there's going to be a need for a lot of different opinions when a lot of information does start to, like, big information starts to trickle down. People are going to be seeking information, and they'll have a wealth of podcasts to choose from. That is for sure. But I think it'll fill a need. From because I don't think mainstream media is prepared for this. They don't have a newsroom dedicated to this topic, or most don't even have a reporter.
They've got a kind of cookie cutter layout that they do when they touch on subjects like these, and they're usually puff pieces into fill time and stuff like that, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of really good, interesting cases. Yeah. What drew me to this one was actually proximity. It's about 40 minutes away from where I live, so I've gone out to the site, I think 2 or 3 times, just to kind of get a feel from it, because there's so much like real-time information that was recorded from that night that you can really get a feel for what happened and where. You can trace the flight path from the on-the-ground witnesses really well. And there's several versions of the 911 tape floating around. I got the original one from Mike Walsh, the reporter who actually got it from the dispatch office. And it's uncensored, so I had the addresses, so I went and looked it up. And that's how I was able to kind of compile that in my first video on Google Earth, because I knew the exact addresses of several of the witnesses on the tape. Excuse me.
That's right. what was there a moment or a case? What was it that made you go from this skeptical essayist to someone who is, I don't want to call you believer, but at least a researcher and at least more open-minded to this idea?
There is a specific case, actually. It's kind of a weird story. It was an article in the Skeptical Inquirer. Famous skeptic author Joe Nickel wrote a piece on the incident at Exeter. I think that was 1965. Famous case. John G. Fuller, I think, wrote the book. The headline of the article was "Incident at Exeter Solved," which rubbed me the wrong way, because we don't, even when I was a skeptic, I mean, I guess I'm still a skeptic in a way, but I don't like using the word solved. It's very certain and, like as if there were an objective truth. I read this. He postulated that it was a KC-97 fuel tanker jet refueling another airline, and that the lights that people saw, those red lights at a 45-degree angle, were the lights bouncing off the boom, the fuel tube that connects the two jets. And I thought that was ridiculous. And it made me question my own biases and like how I judge content created by skeptics versus believers. I realized that I had a bias myself, that when I would get this magazine, I would take these authors' word for it over, people describing their sightings and stuff. And that wasn't how I wanted to approach things anymore. And that was my kind of final straw of burnout. I thought the premise was ridiculous. I thought it was a little pompous, and I didn't want to be associated with it anymore. So I just kind of stopped. The rest of the writers and stuff were kind of done with it too. And we all just kind of broke ways. And I didn't want to think about it anymore, because it was, and we see this now too. And I get into these conversations too. It's very highly intense, combative arguments. And it's all coming from an emotional level, which, like, that's fine. Yeah, people have emotions. Not everything's like facts and logic, obviously. But I don't know. It wasn't healthy for me. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I stepped back for a while and kind of closed that chapter. And it wasn't until speaking to my friend back in 2020 about, he was an older friend of mine that we reunited after many years. And when I was a kid, he and I were both really into UFOs and abductions. We read Intruders and Communion and stuff like that. Big into the X-Files at the time. Around 1994, mind you. And he kind of convinced me. We were talking about it and reminiscing. I was like, there were some interesting ones. I was like, I have the perfect one. It's 1994, back when we were originally interested in this stuff, and it's so close. So that was the first one I kind of dove in with an objective viewpoint. I didn't want to take anything for granted, and that includes the extraterrestrial hypothesis. I think kind of colloquially now, you ask any person on the street, what's a UFO, and they'll say it's an alien spaceship. These words are interconnected completely. And I didn't want even that bias affecting my judgment when I went into the case. So I said it in the beginning of that video. I wanted to just look at all the claims and not presuppose like, oh, they're claiming alien ship. It's just something unknown. And I wanted to see if I could identify it personally. Still working on it a little bit, but I don't have a good answer for this one. I think it's really neat. I think it's a good mystery, and it's definitely a case that other people should be looking at.
Man, that's an amazing answer. Thank you.
Well, you say you're living in Michigan right now. Were you living there back in '94?
Oh yeah, I've lived here, aside from a brief stint in Escondido, California. That was about 2 months. I've lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan, my whole life.
Did you did that make the news? Do you remember it contemporary back then?
Not really. Maybe some blurbs. I know that it was covered in several of the local newspapers, Grand Rapids Press, all the way out to the Holland Sentinel, Muskegon, Rhine Haven. They did report it. I was a kid. I wasn't reading the newspaper too much back then, unless someone pointed out that, hey, there's a UFO article in here. So no, I didn't really know about it. And that surprised me too, just because of the amount of independent corroborating witnesses in this case. This case should have a lot more light on it, and it doesn't, which is odd. Because not only do you have multiple independent witnesses describing the same thing, we have recordings of them describing it in real time as it happened. So that there's no room for memory distortion or exaggerating the details and stuff as you recall it in the future. It's all on tape, which is incredible.
Well, yeah, I think maybe the most compelling conversation maybe I've heard on the UFO conversation was when the 911 operator is calling up the NOAA radar operator, and the
Yeah.
radar operator is saying, well, yeah, there is something there. Have you found any other? It seems like one of the very few cases where you actually have that radar signature as well as visual
Right.
identification.
There's another case around the same time, I think, across the lake in Chicago, that you do have some 911 recordings of, but nothing with weather radar. And I should state that it's weather radar, not like air traffic control. But while I was researching this case, I became friends with Jack Bouchon, the radar operator. We communicated quite a bit back and forth. And I think some of the details of the case did get misrepresented in some of the publications. You'll see those radar maps. I have them in my video too. They were drawn after the fact because it's 1994. They didn't save these things on computer. The next day he was being interviewed. Are you familiar with Professor Swords, Michael Swords? Excuse me. He was a former NICAP member, published author. Gosh, what was the name of his books? I can't recall off the top of my head. He was one of the primary there were several. He was one of the primary investigators from NICAP with Dave Ford. Oh, no, sorry. He was QFOS. Dave Ford was NICAP. They kind of did a joint venture and interviewed him the day after in the weather station. And they were there, the way they were drawn out were kind of kidney bean shaped, because he expressed that these things were on the radar. They were brighter and larger than, general aircraft or storms or anything like that. That isn't the way that it displays on the radar screen. I found out it's more of a straight line, but it still kind of communicates that these things were so bright that Jack kind of speculated that they may have been assisting the signal. The way radar works, obviously, is they're firing microwaves at something and then they bounce back. He thought, since they were so bright, and that's so uncommon, that maybe whatever these objects were also emitting that to make them look so bright. Because he said there's no way it was any type of conventional aircraft or storms. It wasn't ground clutter, because he would angle the radar dish up. That's how you clear ground clutter, or what's it called? Anomalous propagation. So he checked for that. The normal kind of mundane excuses that you'd see anomalies on radar. He was pretty experienced. So he was young at the time, but he was still an experienced person. He got promoted out to Georgia, I believe. So, I mean, he knew what he was doing, and it really was out of the ordinary.
Yeah. What particularly was out of the ordinary? When the people are looking up in the sky and seeing lights, what really made them, call 911 and say, something really strange is going on?
I did think that was kind of a weird reaction to call 911 on a UFO, but multiple people did it. I mean, there's on the tape itself, I think there was 4 or 5. What they were all seeing, it was described like a wreath or a ring of Christmas lights in the sky, so multicolored, rotating, and then each light would shoot off and then come back to it. Which that's the part that gets me. I don't know what that could be. There were some speculations that, like, oh, maybe it's hot air balloons, which I'm trying to find someone who's more familiar with FAA regulations, because it was March in Michigan at 9:30 p.m. Visibility's low. It's very dark at that time, even on clear sky. I don't know if that's okay to be flying hot air balloons, and I don't know if someone was just doing it anyway. However, the behavior described by all of the witnesses, some of the objects would shoot off and then come back really quick and reform. That description matches with all the people who called in. And it also kind of lines up with there was another woman who Cindy Pravda, who witnessed it about half an hour earlier north in Grand Haven, which is 15 or 20 minutes north. She said that she saw them all in a line, kind of hovering there above the horizon, just staring out her kitchen window, and she watched them. And the outer ones would do that same behavior, where they would shoot off and then come back. She said they hung there for about half an hour before they just kind of took off. And that happens to coincide with the timing that Troy Prince and his friends and the Graves family both simultaneously saw it and started calling in 911. Now, similar sightings were described. There was a truck driver the night before who saw them in a line, much like Cindy Pravda's description, and also in the same area, right off that highway up there. So you have a lot of consistent descriptions of these things on ground. Now, there's a 10-minute gap between the ground sightings and then when Officer Velthouse gets there, which is around the time that the dispatcher calls Jack at the weather station. So we can speculate that it's the same objects, but we don't know for sure. And I want to point that out. If you follow the flight path, it does kind of line up. You know, it's an arcing motion over the western side of the state, over the lake. And they do meet up a bit, but there is a from what I can tell, just based on the timing of the call and the times I know the police officer got there, there's like a 10-minute kind of uncertainty. But I feel personally like it's safe to assume that's probably the same thing. By the time that police officer got to the Graves home responding to their call, it had traveled south, you know, maybe a few miles. He says he never got more than 2 or 3 miles away from it when he chased it. But at that point, that object, that ring that the whole family saw and the neighbors saw, had split into 2 objects. Now, this is where Jack comes into the story, and he starts reporting that they are in separate groups, but they start forming, the way he's seeing it is top down. They start forming triangular formations, but they're not all in the same plane. You got one up here, one down here, and one down here, and they're all kind of like moving up and down as they're traveling kind of southwest. So they will separate and come back from his perspective on the radar screen too. So the behavior still does match, but there is that little bit of uncertainty. Like, are they seeing the same things that the radar is picking up? Probably. Who knows though? What is this? Who knows?
Wow. Okay. Oh, sorry. I had like two questions. Did you get a determination of how far these things were traveling out and then coming back in?
No.
Okay.
No. That specificity wasn't in there. I managed to get my hands on the MUFON reports that do exist. I know that 2 MUFON investigators worked on that, and I only found one of their paperwork. So maybe there's more information out there. MUFON's pretty tight-lipped about it. I don't know if that's because they've sold that data to Bigelow and they don't have access to it anymore. But like I mentioned I think in the end of both of my videos, that there's 10 videotapes and over a dozen photographs of this event from multiple angles, and none of them have ever been published. And in fact, in MUFON's own journal, Shirley Coyne, the late Shirley Coyne, who wrote the part 1 on this article, there was never a part 2, mentions them by name. So it's not rumor. We know that they exist. I've spoken to the current chair of Michigan. He's admitted to me that they've existed, but then just kind of has ghosted me. So they're out there. I don't know if Michigan MUFON has them or Bigelow has them out at Skinwalker Ranch, but they exist. They were described as kind of bad, you know, just lights in the sky, but it's still another data point. It doesn't need to look that impressive to me, but if you can still kind of place the location, that's just one more perspective on this case, which is already pretty interesting. Yeah. So I'd really love to see those. I've had other people try and reach out, bigger names than myself, try to reach out to them and get them to no avail either. They're lost to time as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, do you have any theories behind that? Do you think it's just incompetence and record keeping, or do you think that there might be a more nefarious reason for them being kept secret?
I don't want to speculate and say that, like, you know, MUFON is a group of cartoon villains that are deliberately hiding things, but I've spoken to members of MUFON in other chapters, and similar things have happened to them where their evidence that they've collected just gets buried and they don't have access to it anymore. The witnesses don't have access anymore, and then nothing comes of it, which is interesting, you know, because you see any TV spot about UFOs and they'll usually bring a MUFON guy out, and they're out there and they're collecting this data and they're publishing their magazine that you can get with their membership. But that's it. You know what I mean? Like they make it a point to be on scene for all of these things, to collect all this data, and then you just never see anything about it again. So I'm not really sure what their motivation is. Maybe they're going to sell another batch to Bigelow. Who knows?
Yeah, that's interesting that data has become valuable to a point where it's able to be sold.
Yeah, that is pretty surprising.
But going back to just for a second, this idea of calling 911.
Right.
Like, humans aren't dumb. Like, we're not dumb. Most people understand what a plane looks like, or I think
I agree.
I think if to the point where you're picking up the phone in 1994 and calling 911, there's a certain sense of fear, even.
Yeah,
like, you're afraid. Like, I've never seen this, and I've been looking out over this lake for decades. I've owned this house, and I've never seen anything like this. Who the hell? Like, I couldn't even imagine. Like, 911.
And
okay,
see,
sure, call them.
And I used to say things like this too. Yeah, you can be fooled by a plane in the sky. You can be fooled by Venus, but for how long? You don't walk away from that moment for the rest of your life being bamboozled. You say, "Oh man, that kind of tricked me. I realize that's a plane now." How often have you looked at an optical illusion and then just, "Oh, I've accepted this. This illusion is true." You know what I mean? You look at it, you investigate yourself. Everyone is curious. But as to the calling 911, while it is kind of a weird reaction, I'm really happy they did. And maybe more people should, because it does create a public record. Most police reports are public record and you can access them.
Right.
So, I mean, given the two options between MUFON and calling 911, calling 911 seemed to work out better because now more people can actually look at all this. So I don't know if you should be calling 911 about UFOs. I don't know if that's an issue, but
I don't think we're like, it's the equivalent of us saying bomb on a plane to call 911.
Right. I know it's an emergency line,
if you see something like this, but I say, call them. If you're sitting there and you're watching, because anytime I've seen anything anomalous in the sky post my experience, I've always taken the time to just sit there and observe it as long as I can, because it 10 times out of 10, it's just something that you think it is what it is, but it's really not. And it ends up going away. Every once in a while, though, you're like, well, that is kind of weird. But for that, it just seems like the display of these objects was so grand and so in your face that a segment of society said, holy shit, I need to call 911. I need to get the cops out to take a look at this. So I bet a part of it is also to just validate for themselves and have somebody else look at it so they can say, yes, ma'am, we also saw the lights. We're getting phone calls, just to confirm that they're not losing it.
Right. I love that with the 911 dispatcher, he's like the constant through all these. You can hear his kind of his attitude about it just shift the whole way. He's like, yeah, they're looking at it. And he's like kind of making fun of people. He's like, well, did you move? And then it moved. And he's like, yeah. He's like, well, that's how perspective works. And he's kind of like making fun of it a little bit. And then he's getting more and more calls. He's like, and then he ends up calling the weather radar operator and he starts freaking out. And there's actually, this isn't that related, but there's a misquote in there where the dispatcher says that they're cylindrical. And I'm 90% sure he believed they are circular, but that's been taken off out of context in a couple articles. I think there was a recent article from a local affiliate where I am, Wood TV8, that I believe it was called like Witness Vindicated after so many years, and it had Jack on it, and they were kind of running with that cylindrical description. Nowhere in any of the notes or in any of the fieldwork papers was it described as cylindrical. It's just one of those things that pop up. Sometimes people describe things in a strange way. But yeah, I mean, you can hear the excitement even in the dispatcher, in Officer Velthouse. Like, they're seeing these things too, and just like, I don't know what it is. You see a light in the sky, and you're like, okay, that could be a plane, that could be a star, that could be a helicopter. But whatever this was not fitting in any of those categories, even after watching them for long periods of time. And if it was the same objects that they were seeing on radar, those rational explanations don't fit it either. Just because of the, I want to say size, but from a radar operator's perspective, the brightness of the returns of these objects were so large that he knew not storms, not conventional aircraft. I don't know what that leaves. And that is a situation where you don't want to jump to a conclusion. That's an argument from ignorance, right? I don't know what that is, so it must be. We don't want to do that. But it seems anomalous, at least for now, and that's cool, right? That's what we all like. We're all trying to identify these things. We're all trying to look into it. It's our hobby, at least, right? So this is a good case. Let's spread it out. And I want to say this summer, Unsolved Mysteries next season, there'll be an episode about this too that I was in. I think I'm allowed to say that. Yeah, this summer, episode 2, I think.
That. Well,
Yeah,
well, I would just say from just a guy who's done a lot of acting, don't say you'll be in it. Just say
right.
Just
Yeah,
say I was filmed for it, and hopefully
I was filmed
I
for
make
it.
the cut.
And
sometimes you hit the cutting room floor, but I have a feeling you're going to be in it. You're
I hope so.
One of the foremost. I think I throw around the word expert, but I think you've
It's safe to say I'm an expert on this case.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, if you want to label
case.
yourself that, absolutely. I think it's true. I think that's an accurate statement. I'd just rather you say it than me because I only know how much deep research. Obviously, you've done a ton, but
quite a bit.
I'm always weary about throwing that label around. But
whatever. Who knows? Yeah. No one's a real expert on these things. But
exactly.
The unfortunate thing that comes with that filming for Unsolved Mysteries is there's a couple things that are really interesting about this case that I can't talk about yet. So there's more info to come. So be sure to watch that.
Well, I'm hoping it's either some kind of video or because I know when Netflix, a company like Netflix goes into a town like that, they let everyone know, hey, 1994, did you see this thing? If so, contact us. And I bet they probably got some people that came out of the woodwork that had never spoken about it before, and who knows what they might do, what VHS tape they're sitting on, or
I think you might be right about that. There's also just some extra experience and perspective from Jack in it, because it's really Jack's story. In my opinion, like at least that's the novel aspect of this story, the radar operator. Yeah. And the way he experiences and the things that he experienced, that whole story isn't told yet, which is nice. So that'll be interesting. A couple of things that I worked out separately, but also on calls with him and the producer, is that he watched these things on the radar till about midnight. So you're talking 9:30 to midnight-ish.
Wow.
That's his rough estimate.
2.5 hours.
What they did after the land is more started kind of meeting up. And in that southern portion of Lake Michigan, where you have Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois kind of in that cup there, that was the only portion of Lake Michigan that wasn't frozen over that night. And that happens to be the spot where all of these objects started coming and swarming. He said it was like a beehive or an anthill, where they're all just swarming and moving out and coming back in. Happens to be Lake Michigan doesn't freeze over completely very often. So that was kind of rare as it is. But on this night, I have to be careful with what I say, because I've looked things up with them too. On this night, that portion was not frozen. I think if people were to look in the open source information, they could confirm this. That's all I'll say about that. But that is also on record. I'll say that. It's also on the ICE records exist.
So undersea alien base in Lake Michigan as confirmed? Is that what we're saying?
I have no idea. There's a lot of patterns with people seeing objects interacting with water. It happens all over. There's that New Jersey reservoir back in, I think, 65, Hudson Valley. You see that.
What do you think, guys? Could that be considered an observable? Like, should that be a 6 observable? I know there's transmedium travel, right? Mm-hmm. But I feel like water, these craft are always around two things: water, ocean, bodies of water, and nuclear facilities or power or weapons.
Or the people that report their sightings, there's a higher frequency of that. Because you always have to think, like, we know of the sightings people have that get reported, and the information we have about them is what they report. So there could be millions more sightings and weirder stuff, but looking for patterns isn't a bad thing. I like it. I mean, I'm interested in it because you do hear a lot of cases where People see them hovering over water or interacting with water in weird ways. Like in Hudson Valley, they were sending down like a red dot that was kind of going into the water and like a mesh screen thing. It's interesting. There's a few parallels between this case and Hudson Valley. One's more something that you'll see in the Unsolved Mysteries episode, but the water thing, it's interesting. Does that interaction with the water maybe suggest it's some type of actual, like one of our craft, like a secret craft, and it's doing things? Maybe it's landing. I don't know. I can't say.
I just like the idea of, I think we talked about this the other day, rather, right? When you think of underwater bases, like people walking around a whole bay of ships and, huge hangars underwater. I mean, to me, it could be just as simple as, hey, you're a lot less likely to be seen in the middle of a huge lake or the ocean. Like nothing's gonna probably be able to observe you in any meaningful
I'm not gonna go
way.
Observe anything in the ocean.
Yeah, there's no chance.
Too spooky.
Yeah, way too spooky. That's true.
Yeah. So I mean it's an interesting aspect of it. I don't know what it was doing with the water, especially with the limited perspective that we have that information from top down on a radar. But still, it's cool. It's definitely cool. It's definitely something to look into.
We've got, I think Catherine Splashington is becoming one of our hands down funniest commenters in the show's history. You're getting up there with Lou Elizondo's neck and all sorts of fun folks, but she writes, it's not just the Hawaiian shirt, but I could totally see Nick chilling at a pool bar in Jamaica. Then follows it up with, does Nick smoke Marleys? I've smoked those for years. Nothing like a pack of Marleys in bed after a hot, steamy, pleasurable UFO podcast.
I don't smoke Morleys, but I do smoke. And you might catch me at a pool bar, but never in a pool. I don't swim.
Oh man, that is.
I actually don't drink either, hilarious. But I'd hang out there if they had coffee.
Wow, you're really killing the vibe here, Nick.
I know. Sorry to disillusion everyone.
Oh my god. That's just hilarious. McEwen, thank you so much for the $2.99 super sticker. Appreciate it. Steve Long says, it sounds like Nick did not abandon skepticism, but rather has refined himself into a more proper skeptic.
Yeah, and that is the difference. And I will admit, back in those days, I was a cynic. I was a debunker, as gets thrown around. Now I see it more, and like the big skeptic names we have now, who we have, like Greenstreet, Mick West. They get jumped on quite a bit, but really they are taking deep dives and researching these cases because they're trying to identify them, which is what we're doing. I really don't buy into this whole like rival archetypes of skeptic and believer. We're all doing the same thing. We're all trying to identify these things. Like Greenstreet and Mick West, they're not being malicious when they do these things. They're not trying to personally offend anyone. This is their research, and this is where that's brought them. You know what I mean? And like I don't have any preconceived notions about UFOs anymore. I admit that lots of people see things they don't understand. Obviously, that's undeniable. But let's all try to identify the ones that seem weird, because those are the cool ones. That's what brings us all together. We're identifying these. That's cool. That's what we want, right? So yeah, I've ditched that cynicism. I've ditched that kind of arrogance, and I think it's a much healthier approach. I think it's a better way to approach the subject, and it seems to be working out. I found a cool case already.
Yeah. And I mean, I always have a hard time calling Stephen Greenstreet a skeptic for a couple of reasons. The first is he's seen a UFO, like he's had an experience, which is the part that absolutely boggles my mind when people are like, you're trolling just to troll. And there is an aspect of troll when he posts things. I mean, he does it with a snarky sort of like, I've done the research. I know more than you. I have come. His knowledge is coming from a position of authority, and that is obvious in the way he posts things, for me at least. But
I feel like those responses are retaliatory, honestly, because people come at him pretty hard too.
I agree with that as well.
Don't ask me. I'm a Green Street stan. Don't ask me. I'm biased about him.
Yeah.
I think he's funny.
No, I think he's funny too, man. I love him to death. But I can see how it's a double-edged sword. It's half of the people coming at him, and then him just being like, "Screw you guys. Look at this."
And it's really hard not to respond that way. I've been very combative on Twitter lately. I can't help myself. Everyone wants to fight on that app. I don't know. Maybe it's not a good place.
Well, dude, I mean, it's a place with limited characters to express yourself in a format that is only one-dimensional in human communication. Yeah. And so it's really easy to pop off on people and get pissed off with people.
It's true.
Especially if you don't even bother talking to them.
I'm like pretty guilty of it.
Well, I think we all are. Go ahead, Riley.
People, accuse Stephen Greenstreet of being a troll, but I think almost everyone on Twitter is a troll. Every post I see seems like they're just trolling for people to disagree with them and stem arguments, which is amusing at some points, but not good for anyone's
arguing
sanity.
Can be fun too, and like maybe you can change people's minds. I don't think it happens that often, but there is the potential for that. So I'm not against arguing at all, but sometimes it gets a little heated. But as for Green Street and asking if he's a skeptic or not, because he's had an experience, I personally haven't. But even if he had, what did he see? It was like one of those flying Vs, silent flying V. What is that? Our language that we use for paranormal subjects and stuff like that is borrowed from everyday language or borrowed from the media. So we use UFO, but not everybody who's saying UFO means the same thing. You know what I mean? The way Mick West uses the term UFO is not the same way that like your average UFO Twitter user will say UFO. You know what I mean? So Green Street saw a UFO, doesn't know what it is. And that's it. So, like, becoming a believer or a skeptic from that, I mean, it doesn't necessarily track. You saw something weird, you probably want to figure it out. But, when you say you're a believer, what does that mean? What do you believe?
Right.
Because there are obviously unidentified flying objects. People experience that all the time because they have not identified them. Does it mean you're a believer in the ETH? Not necessarily. You have people who think they're from other dimensions. They think it, something outside of our reality interacting with our consciousness. Maybe there's lots of different theories for UFOs. So being a believer, what does that mean? I don't know. Does it mean you have a pet theory like that? Maybe. Does it mean? I think typically it does mean ETH, but who am I to say what other people believe? But these names for these two groups, believers and skeptics, like they're almost kind of meaningless. And I keep saying I really hate that dynamic because it doesn't need to be there, and we don't need to be at each other's throats, and we don't need to be calling each other names and stuff like that. Not using skeptic or debunker as a pejorative, but debunker, that I could take or leave that term, but skeptic or believer, we're UFO enthusiasts regardless. Jason Colavito is a UFO enthusiast, I think, but he's a different.
Especially as blanket terms, right? Like,
sure,
you can be a skeptic or believer on a specific case. You can be skeptical of 99 cases out there, but a believer of one. And where does that leave you? It's got to be on an individual basis.
My advice to everyone when they're looking at cases and new cases, just reserve your judgment. Who's to say there even is an objective truth? That's not for me. I'm not a philosopher. But events in the past, how certain can you be? How confident can you be about your opinion about this thing when you weren't there and you're observing information after the fact? You know what I mean? I would never feel comfortable saying like, no, you did not see, whatever you happen to believe it is. That was probably something mundane. You don't know that. No one can say that for sure. So I reserve my judgment on all these cases. I won't say no to aliens. I won't say no to consciousness beings or interdimensional things or things coming out of the ocean and their crafts. I personally don't necessarily think that they're craft. I have no reason to, but I'm completely open to it. I'm open to anything. I'm open to Bigfoot, honestly. Show me a Bigfoot. I'm fine with it. I'm not going to say no. I still think the Patterson Gimlin film looks pretty good. That's my opinion.
Yeah, it's just weird. I mean, for me, I don't want to get a deep dive on Bigfoot, but it's just
Right, yeah.
weird that God, how come we haven't caught one of that quality with newer cameras or
No, it's a good one.
it's
I like it.
Yeah, no, I like it. It's just I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah.
I've got a tough time with Bigfoot. I've got a real tough time with it. There's a lot of stuff with Bigfoot. Yeah, but I mean, John Greenwald will say, you know, that he's been to these conferences where the Bigfoot researchers are doing this like genuine scientific research into this that at least merits people looking at and taking as seriously as the research allows.
What doesn't merit someone looking at it, though, honestly, you know, unless it's just like a guy making something up. Like you have an event like the case I did, you have multiple people seeing something at the same time. Of course that merits looking at. It just you have to find the people who are willing to do it, and then they have to find the funding to do it, and that's not the easiest thing to do. So that makes sense. And I realize progress has been slow in this field for 70 plus years, but like, no, don't let people say it's not worth looking at or UFOs in general aren't worth looking into. Like, how can you even say that? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things here real quick. I got some comments to read through. And guys, we'll be on Discord after the show. So check out the Discord link in the description below, where apparently Stephen Greenstreet and Jeremy Mowen make out in secret. I can't verify or confirm nor deny that rumor, but only one way to find out. Join the free Discord of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Thank you, Aaron, for that. There was another comment here from Philip Blair. He says it's fascinating to listen to the calls and the police chatter following the UFOs after public release at Jazz Shaw, like listening to a real life version of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I put your link to Invisible Night School, the YouTube channel. Guys, go subscribe. Perfect. Go subscribe to Nick's channel. It's pinned at the live chat right now, and it's also in the description below. If you want to hear those phone calls, those recordings between the National Weather Office and dispatch and people calling in, this is a beautiful timeline from when it started to when it ended, and it'll take up a total of maybe 45 minutes, less than an hour of your time, or just under an hour. I'm looking at in 5 videos. You can consume basically this whole event, and it's laid out beautifully and simply. And so go check it out.
It's the case is definitely worth looking at to anyone who hasn't yet, or anyone who hasn't heard of it, which is insane to me. Check it out. Yeah, like he said, it's not very long. It's kind of digestible, but there's a lot of information in there to unpack. And I will say, most people haven't watched part 2 of that, which covers the after investigation and kind of where each group fumbled with the case. And I mean, maybe that led to why it's not so well known. Like MUFON dropped the ball a little bit. I personally think Night Captain QFOS with Michael Swords and Dave Ford, I think they jumped to a couple conclusions and were a little lazy. I lay that out with math. I actually did some math for the second video, so please make that worthwhile and watch that one.
Yeah,
I don't want to have to do math if I don't need to. So
Mace One said to call NORAD. Thank you for the $20 donation. Truly appreciate it. NORAD is a place you could call. Somebody had also mentioned the FAA. Other than the police, just call somebody. I say always report it. If it's if it's insanely anonymous. Wow, can't talk. But another thing you could do is just record it on your iPhone. Just record you talking about either what you're looking at or what you're seeing. That way there's a record of it, and do what you want with it. Maybe share
make a copy.
Make a copy for sure, but definitely save it, whatever you do. And I it's always valuable. I mean, look, it's will it change the minds of academia? Probably not, but who knows? One day this could go into an archive, or you might be recording something that is part of an event that's big, like this 1994 sighting, or like the Phoenix Light sightings. And you might have a Netflix in 20 years come knocking around and being like, hey, do you have a recording of this, or do you guys remember this, or do you have an interesting perspective or tale on this story? Because I think Netflix did an amazing job on the Berkshire's UFO incident, and breaking that down. And I thought it was awesome because there was no cheesy graphics, there was no terrible CGI or spooky mute, cheesy 50s style X-Files type music. It was just a straightforward story told from the witnesses that experienced it, and
they handled it seriously.
They took the topic seriously, and it was cool. And I was like, man, this is probably one of the best productions I've seen on just. And also goes to show you how just one story can be told beautifully over an hour, or maybe even nowadays you could do 2-part series on things in Netflix. So hopefully it's an interesting enough thing where they've spread it over 2 episodes instead of just 1. But I don't know if I've seen Unsolved Mysteries do that, but it would be cool. Anyway, my point is, it would be fun. But you never know. I mean, always try to record it, I guess is my point. Always
call the police.
Record it. Call a friend, call your mom, just call somebody, record it, call, whoever.
Go get your neighbors, have them look at it too.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea either. And I mean, a lot of people say film it. I think it's useful depending on what you're filming it with. But I would, if it's an event like this one, where it took, what was the time span you said again? About 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Let's say
for on ground witnesses, there was 9 to 9:30 was the original Cindy Pravda's, which was north, and then in Holland, when people actually started calling 911, it was maybe 15-20 minutes of on ground sightings before it moved out over the lake, and then the focus got switched over to Jack. I don't know if anyone else called in after that point.
My point is, have a tripod. If this thing's hanging around for more than 5 minutes, it's going to be really hard to track it with your hand and your phone. That's why I say I think recording it would probably, audio recording it, I think would be best.
Explain what you're seeing then,
because call your buddy on the other side of town to turn on their camera too and triangulate it.
Or at least have them see it and ask your neighbors the next day if they saw it, get their stuff. Compile it all, because the more independent witnesses you have kind of corroborating, the more compelling it is. That's what I loved about this case. You had the Graves family, his family of, I think it was 4, who are all seeing this, but then 2.5 blocks up around the corner, a completely separate group of people are watching it at the same time, and they're back around the corner and up a level, but they're both seeing it. It was over an old farm. It's all flat land now. There used to be a barn there, but the way they're describing it, it's like there was something there. I have no doubt in my mind that they were looking at something that apparently looked weird. Apparently it looked like a circle of different colored lights, and the lights would shoot off. I don't know what looks like that. Who knows? That's the fun part. But there was absolutely 100% something that they were seeing.
Lou, I think you're muted there, but I wanted to mention so Nick said something really, really interesting in the pre-show, which was we're about 28 years from 1994 when this happened. You were telling us that 28 years prior to 1994, there was also some UFO sightings in the same region.
And I think you guys will know about these cases, though you might not know. We've all heard the explanation swamp gas for UFOs. Oh, it was just swamp gas. The impetus of that was from the 1966 UFO wave in Michigan, which was in the southeast. But one of the earliest recorded sightings of that flap was in Holland on March 8th, 1966. It was just a light going by. The woman said it was kind of strange. Now, this all kind of ended up being... you have the sighting in Dexter, Michigan, where it came down on a farmland. What was his name? Frank Manor and his son saw this thing, and then multiple counties police came out from the opposite angle and came over the hill and also witnessed it. Then the next night in Hillsdale, which I believe is a little northwest, Hillsdale College, there's an all-girl dormitory. Estimates of 88 plus students and faculty all witnessed a very similar object moving out kind of across from their dorm above an arboretum. You have 88 people all looking at something. Their dorm mom, which I think is an old term, I think it's kind of like a volunteer RA. She was formerly a newspaper editor, and she worked for the school. She came in and told all the students in the dorm, write down everything you see. Like, people are going to be out. You're going to be interviewed about this. Write down everything. Multiple students wrote that down. Those notes are all lost. They were essentially dismissed at the time. It was the 60s. But Hynek came down. It was the tail end of Blue Book at this time. Some people would say that this is the straw that kind of broke Blue Book's back, that in the Portage County case, which happened right around the same time. Hynek came down. I think he investigated for either 2 or 3 days. As he was traveling, Quintanilla had already called the Detroit Press Club and set up a presser for him. So before he got there, he was already booked to set up this press call. He gets down there, talks to a couple of the witnesses. I'm not even sure if he got to Hillsdale. And he's hanging out with some MSU buddies, which is in the area, Michigan State University. They're throwing around swamp gas. There's a little bit of contention here. Either his professor buddies at MSU suggested this, or the civil defense director, who went to the dorm at the time and watched it, blurted it out. I've heard 2 accounts of this. The swamp gas idea. And of course, I think everybody knows that the presser or Hynek suggests swamp gas. That's the thing that got Gerald Ford, who was a senator at the time, really riled up and demanded congressional hearings on UFOs. Unfortunately, that just kind of led to the Condon report, which was kind of a nail in the coffin of the subject for a really long time. It kind of broke the UFO story back in 66. It kind of shut down the Air Force's involvement with it, which they wanted it out anyway. So I don't know how much that affected it, but it was kind of the end of an era there. And it's such an infamous case. Everybody knows swamp gas, but I don't think many people know about the actual case. It's actually the subject of a partially complete next episode of mine. And I had some Lampy and Ryan recorded voices for me for a long time ago. They're just sitting there waiting for it to come out. It's just, I've been trying to track down those notes that all the students wrote. And I'm led to believe now that they were just discarded. Between those 2 cases, Dexter, Michigan and Hillsdale, Michigan, the 2 nights in the swamp gas case, the kind of infamous swamp gas case, Hillsdale doesn't get as much spotlight, which I think is strange. When you have 88 witnesses all witnessing and saying they see the same thing, you'd think that would have a little more weight to it, but it didn't. So I wanted to get their voices. I've managed to. One of them wrote for the school paper at the time. I managed to find all of her old articles. I had to get in contact with them because their archive wasn't working. I have those, so that is in the pipe. It'll be coming out eventually. But yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, there's these 28-year periods. And in 4 days, of course, will be the 28th anniversary of the Holland case in 1994.
So eyes up. Eyes up, people, Michigan.
Yeah, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
I'm going to look.
Yeah, I mean, if it comes on those days,
that reminds me of like the
absolutely
cicadas life
insane.
cycle.
Yeah. Well,
but
that kind of goes to the theory rather that this is biological. Maybe it's one of just a really difficult version of a cicada to understand, and it just manifests itself in this very fantastical way once every 28 years. I mean, nature does have a really fun way. She repeats herself all the time. Right.
It could be meteorological. It could be geological too. But I don't know, the way people describe it, and maybe that's people's kind of anthropomorphic bias where they personify things, but people do describe an intelligence to these things, which is, what pushes that that kind of like default ETH stance on things, is people do see an intelligence with this thing, whether it's interacting with them or not, or just the way it behaves. And like I said, yeah, humans do have that kind of tendency to personify things, make things a little more human. But it might be more than that, and that's super fascinating. We should look at that. If it is intelligent, that's incredible. So that's not something, I don't think that's something to dismiss. I think it's something to at least consider.
Yeah. Jazz Shaw, who by the way has been a big fan of your fact pulling and your knowledge. He's been commenting throughout the show, and he says there's still a lot of cases out there nobody has heard of.
Yeah,
we'll have one at the debrief next week.
Oh,
Always
sweet.
Lots of research coming out. Excellent, Jazz. Well,
yeah, I love these obscure cases, and it always surprises me each time I find a good one that, like, how is this not getting press? How are we seeing Roswell, Phoenix Lights and stuff over and over again when there's these really cool cases and they're just sitting in old books and shelves and newspaper articles? Like, that information's out there. It's all open source, basically. But we kind of cling on to these bigger ones because they're more well known and they get covered in the news. So many cool cases out there. So many weird cases too, which like a lot of people's first reaction to some of these weird things, and there might be a twinge of weird in this case too. The first is will be like, okay, that's odd. I'll dismiss the whole case. Look at the weird stuff too, because who knows? There's this. How do we know that any of this doesn't exist in that category of not stuff we don't know, but stuff we don't know we don't know? Yeah, I mean that's an expanse, and lots of things could fit into there. So that's always interesting, and I like cases with twinges of weird. So yeah, bring those out. Bring all these old obscure cases out. We've heard.
Well, we should have Jazz come on next Wednesday. We're supposed to have Ted Rowe, but he had to reschedule. So Jazz, if you think the article will be out by next Wednesday, give me a little shout out here in the chat if you want to come on and talk about it, because I always love when Jazz writes an article about this stuff. And you know, his coverage of the Michigan UFO sightings was really good, you know, and yeah, so let us know, Jazz. We'd love to have you back on as always. Rather, did you have a question? I'm sorry, I was thinking of something else here, but if you have another question, go for it.
Yeah, nothing specifically. You kind of alluded to what's up next for you, Nick, the 1966 Michigan case.
Yeah, I have a good amount of it recorded and edited. I'm looking for an ending point because it really could ramble into the Condon report and things like that. I don't think I go back and forth on it. It's 75% done, so it could drop within the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months, depending. I get myself involved with lots of little projects and stuff like that, so some things get on the back burner, which is why I wanted to be introduced as a occasional content creator. I don't have a set schedule for these things, but I do. Right. I'm also interested in going off in other. I wanted to do a video on the history of parapsychology because I think that's pretty interesting. I don't know how much crossover there is between the UFO crowd and the parapsychology crowd, but it is interesting, and it's other weird stuff. So, I mean, how can you not like that?
I kind of want to dive into that for a second, but I had a question I don't want to forget to ask you. I mean, when you come across other skeptics, say like Mick West, like what are the things you disagree with him on, if you do?
I used to, and maybe it was just my interpretation. I thought I feel bad about this, and I completely take it back, but I called him a performative pseudo-intellectual a couple of times, and I want to put that out there. I don't really think that there is a bit
Nick,
of that. But I mean,
Nick, if you're out there, please forgive Nick.
Sorry.
He sometimes
no, I actually I really like the stuff he puts out, even that funny video of the Tic Tac flying around the wing, which I think a lot of people will see that and be like, okay, yeah, I want to at least say that he wasn't going for a duplicate or a recreation. He was showing the method of how easy that would be. Right. And that's always something to consider. That might, I mean, I don't think that video is real either personally, but
I don't think it's real.
You know, I'm not going to say it's not. I'm not certain. Right. You know what I mean? And I think Mick has changed over the last couple of years too. maybe he was a little arrogant and pompous about certain things at first.
I think there was a big change when he talked to Alex Dietrich. If you
That
want
might
my
be it.
personal opinion, ever since I've been watching him, I think since he's had that conversation, there's been, I feel like more patience.
Yes,
from him.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I definitely think so. I got on his case about his use of Occam's razor. I think that's a useless thought model. I think it's misappropriated a lot, and it doesn't actually help any conversations. It's not actually true. It kind of infers that the universe kind of prefers simple answers, which definitely isn't the case. I don't know. We got in a little bit of a back and forth about that like months and months ago. But everything he's been putting out now, really good, really solid. I think people misinterpret him quite often. And people misinterpret everybody on Twitter, but no, I don't disagree with anything he's been saying at all. I think he's putting out good suggestions because that's what they are. They're his attempts to identify these things, which is, like I said, we're all doing that. So we should take that into consideration. At least that's a perspective. That's another mind on this subject. And this is the conclusion he's drawn from that. You know what I mean? I know that like we want there's a certain mystique around these things, you know, because that's kind of the cool thing about it. That's what attracts me to it, is the mystery around it. And I appreciate mystery. But, you know, at the end of the day, we are researching these things. We're looking into them. We are trying to identify them. So, yeah, I'm completely on board with everything he's been doing. And, yeah, he does seem more patient, in my opinion. He's more patient than I am. I can certainly say that.
Yeah. Jazz Shaw says, I'm adding performative pseudo-intellectual to my Twitter profile right now. That's amazing. But yeah, okay, so then going back to sort of this, you were discussing kind of what you're diving into next, or what you'd like to dive into with this parapsychology and UFOs. I mean, what's sort of your early thoughts on this?
Well, I don't necessarily know if there's a connection. I just think it's an interesting kind of subject. You used to be able to get a degree from Duke University in parapsychology, which I think is kind of out there. It's an interesting field that has a cool history, some at least like earnest attempts to try and look into it scientifically. The experiments they created, from my experience in reading them, they weren't good enough, but they were trying. They weren't trying to dupe anyone. I mean, there's the Uri Gellers out there, but there was some attempted science behind that, and I guess there's a connection there. How do we, with UFOs, these anomalous experiences, how do you put that under the lens of science? I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to pretend to be one. I don't know. These are serendipitous encounters, right? These aren't planned for. You're not summoning them, right? Maybe. I think some people say they can. So there are these chance encounters that people are seeing. How do you put that under the lens of science? How do you use the scientific method to investigate that? I don't really know. But looking at other fields that did have at least their toes dipped into science in the past could be a cool stepping stone. Plus, it's just interesting. I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. What would you say is kind of the most mysterious, interesting aspect of parapsychology that you've kind of looked into?
It's hard to say. You see a couple papers that have been published where they say they have like higher than chance rates on these things. Yeah. We all remember the beginning of the original Ghostbusters, where Bill Murray was testing the people with Zener cards, is what they're called. There have been a couple trials that have shown, like I said, higher than chance hit rates. Is that statistical anomaly? I don't know. I like the earnestness of the people trying to do this and trying to make this strange field fit into that box of academia and package it so it's consumable by other academics. I think that's interesting. And maybe that will also kind of help us re-examine how we can use science to look at UFOs too. But I have to be honest, it's been, like I said, since the bent spoon days, since I've actually looked into parapsychology and ghosts and things like that. So it's kind of an idea. It's something I might try out later. I promise I'll make the 1966 flap video before I dive into any of that. I got to get that thing out.
Yeah, I mean, what was I know at the time, and I think Kathy Splashington said something about this. I don't know if I didn't save it, but the Gerald Ford was compelled to a point where he approach the FBI on this? Was it? I can't remember exactly who he went to, but he was pretty upset with the lack of response to the people of Michigan, because it was the people of Michigan that were really jumping down his throat, especially when they came up with the excuse of swamp gas. That just pissed a lot of people off. And swamp gas got Gerald Ford riled up. Best sentence I heard all week. Thank you, rather, for finding that.
And understandably too, that it's a bullshit response. Swamp gas, like that, it doesn't match what people were saying they saw, especially Frank Manor and his son. This thing came down basically in his backyard. And like, I will say, I have visited Dexter, Michigan, and there are a lot of swamps out there. However, there was this great response written by a professor to that claim, and I want to save it because I'm having it read out word verbatim in the episode, so I don't want to spoil it too much. But there's a great response from someone who wrote to the editor of the newspaper about that. But it's a weak response. And Hynek himself said, I'm not saying that this is for all the sightings. It was one, and the press kind of ran with it,
right?
Which is unfortunate. You know, that's sad that happened. But it certainly made Ford mad at the time.
Well, they were under pressure to kind of give prosaic explanations at the time, weren't they?
Yeah,
or was that
absolutely. So it's post Robertson panels. So if you buy into what they're saying, they don't want people calling the civil defense lines about UFOs. I don't like people were calling 911 about it. I think that's kind of a lame excuse too. But yes, when was that? 53, I think. That time onward, especially with Blue Book, they were trying to in and out like, oh, yep, that's the reflection of a goose. That's Venus, and this is marsh gas, or what eventually became swamp gas. Swamp gas rolled off the tongue a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. What do we have this branch of the Air Force for then? If they're just popping up on the scene, talking to two people and giving out a bullshit answer.
Right.
It's kind of stupid. So I understand why he was riled up. I know the Condon report has pretty different. It's controversial, right? But that was the kind of the end result. There's the chain of events led to that, and I think a lot of people see that as a detriment to the UFO field, because it was a little lackluster too. I know that they ended up with a lot of unknowns, even in their report, which is a little odd. It is a tome. I think Michael Huntington may have read the whole thing, but I don't know too many people have gotten through that whole report. It's a thick one, but I don't know. It is kind of culturally and colloquially seen as the nail in the academic coffin of ufology. So,
right,
yeah.
What are I guess I always ask this to our guests. It's one of my favorite questions, but I noticed that you had a wedding ring on. What does your partner think of your fascination with the topic?
She tolerates it.
That's good.
I don't. No, she encourages me. I don't think she's personally into it.
Yeah.
She couldn't care less. Yeah. But no, she definitely supports me with it, and she comes with me on these trips I do to like scout out the locations of these sightings, like Holland and in Dexter. So I mean, she enjoys it a bit. She's just not that into it.
Yeah. Is it ever like I'm always wondering what like the dinner conversations are like at like Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, or birthday parties. Does the family sort of, are they curious about it in a good way, or do they kind of bust your chops?
My mom loves it.
Okay.
She actually does art prints of UFO sightings and stuff that she sells at local markets, which is kind of cool. You know, my mom's super into this stuff.
Did she start doing that before or after you were into this?
She's always been kind of interested in it. She started that after I think I did my first episode of the podcast. It kind of inspired her that way. But you know, like, and my friends too. I have friends who are super into it, and friends who are just kind of like, cool, yeah, which is fine. You know, I don't have anyone who busts my chops about it.
Yeah,
I don't make too outrageous of claims either, though. I mean, what could I tell them that they could really, you know, scoff at? I can present this case, which, like, yeah, multiple independent people saw this. What do you make of that? You know, there isn't a conventional explanation that I'm familiar with that fits that case. So, like, yeah, there's something to it. There's some interest to it, and there's mystique, and that's pretty compelling to people, I think.
Did your mom happen to make that really spooky, I presumably alien skull that's there to your left?
Yeah.
No, her friend 3D printed that for me. He makes smaller ones that are magnets, but it's not plugged in, but it does light up and strobe. Actually, it's actually kind of hard to look at. But
man, your mom's got some interesting friends there, Nick.
Yeah, she does. She's pretty interesting too.
Oh man, maybe we could bring her on for a Mother's Day episode. She sounds fun.
I'm sure she'd be down.
Oh, that's cool. We could display her art.
Everybody bring your moms.
Yeah, well, we did a show with me and my mom and Michael and his mom on Mother's Day last year.
Nice.
And it was fun, but they're not into this topic whatsoever. My mother knows nothing about this.
I get it. You know, people are into different things. I mean, I think this is an interesting thing, and more people could be, but whatever.
Yeah, I think if there was a quick, digestible, and that's kind of what I love about the 2017 case, is that it's these 3 digestible, quick videos that display pilots being incredibly confused at what they're looking at, and the government going, okay, these are real, genuine UAPs or UFOs.
It's definitely a good entry point. And that's why I think you and I talked about this a long time ago. I think it was right after the TMZ show. There was a lot of opinions floating around about it, and I was like, you know what, this is a good, like, starter program, like, new people getting into it. Yeah, this is what you need. It's kind of a basic rundown. It's all stuff we know, but, like,
right, but that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, it's definitely an entry point, and hopefully more people come into this.
Well, the
I mean, it almost seems like, you know, since the Condon report, since 2017, society has been kind of blind to this. You know, no one was talking about the 1994 Michigan case,
right?
And other weird cases, and
the 90s had a bit of a UFO phase, and I think that was partially due to X-Files, but not in a serious way. It was just kind of a pop culture thing, I think. So it existed in media. You'd see ads that are kind of UFO themed. You'd get specials. Fox News was kind of on it for a little while because they did the alien autopsy, which I think was right around the time of the Phoenix Lights too, because I remember watching that live on Fox, the coverage that was going on, and
the late 80s,
and I was like, wow.
The late 80s and 90s were actually kind of a golden era of UFO information that was completely, in most cases, so unverified. Kicked off some of it, you know, like you kick off with Bob Lazar, then you get into the alien autopsy era. You know, I think this 94 case, I think it gets lost because it's not as, and I think it is as sensational as those, but it's not a video of an alien getting dissected. So maybe it gets, it gets lost, or it's not as sexy as this nerdy, you know, former government employee talking about, you know, craft in mountains and stuff like that. So.
Well, I think a lot of people didn't take that stuff seriously, so it really just added to the stigma and made it so people didn't address the real cases.
I mean, like, as corny and weird as that stuff was in the late 80s and 90s, that was my entry point. You know,
right?
What I mean?
Me too.
So you look at the TMZ show now, and you're like, okay, this is a bit more respectable than Alien Autopsy hosted.
It did remind me of that era, of that hard copy, you know,
for sure,
that hard copy era where it's like, and now a report on UFOs, but they did a whole hour, which is great.
I've got such a soft spot for all that stuff. I have a lot of VHSs of it. I mean, like, when did Unsolved Mysteries, I think, started in the late 80s or mid to late 80s, and that's That and that show also on Fox, I think was it was called Sightings. That's what got me
I
going.
called into Sightings when I had my sighting. Like I called into, man, I
loved that show. I'll watch that
show.
now.
Yeah.
I think there's clips around. I think I might have a couple tapes of it too. I keep a VCR just in case for all these kinds of things. And Sightings, I think, was what kicked it off. And then, of course, X-Files premiered. And I think the night X-Files premiered, they also aired Communion with Christopher Walken in it. And I was just freaked out. And that was my first hearing about alien abductions. And I was like really into that then. Remember going to middle school and checking out Bud Hopkins' Intruders. They had that book in the middle school library for some reason. Only UFO book. Check that thing out like a million. I think I still own that copy. I think I didn't return it.
Yeah, he probably stole it from the
middle
school.
Whatever.
Yeah.
They were asking for it.
Well, now they've got a public ban. If that middle school finds you, you are dead.
Well, they're gone. Mine now. They can't come get me.
All right. Well, what are your I'm curious to know what sort of are your thoughts on cases like Roswell? What do you think? I mean, have you done a deep dive into Roswell? If so, what is sort of your takeaway?
I haven't
hate to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious.
I haven't done a deep dive, so take everything I say with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
It's probably the muddiest water of any of the cases. You know what I mean? There's been so many people going back in, so many generational witnesses too, like sons and grandsons coming in and adding to the story. It's too muddied. I like to pose the idea just as a thought that that it's all kind of a dog and pony show by the government to kind of reinforce the ET hypothesis. You know what I mean? I think it's pretty easy to say that the U.S. government, or at least the State Department, has an interest in controlling the UFO narrative. I think that's hard to argue with just based on what they have done. Now, if for some reason they wanted us to think that UFOs were extraterrestrial and that they are covering it up, I think the Roswell story kind of fits that narrative. You know, they released this press release saying flying disc captured, and then, oh, oopsie, no, it's not. Oops. And then they come in and then they show the picture of the tinfoil. Like that looks like someone trying to be inconspicuous. You know, it's the guy whistling and twiddling his thumb.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's weird. It's a suspicious story. So I don't know. And obviously it was so long ago. Like no one knows. And I don't know if we will. You know, how can you be certain about something like that? It's an idea like to throw out there, but like I said, I haven't dived too deep into Roswell in a very long time, and my memory's hazy on all that. It's worth looking at, but like I said, it's real muddy waters now after all this time, and so many different people getting their foot in and getting their little piece and having their book and their movie about it.
Right.
It's pretty hard to distinguish like what's certain people's narratives and what actually happened and what the original witnesses did say, because those stories change over time too. It's a hard one to look at this point.
What I find interesting, when I think of Roswell, one of the first researchers that comes to mind is Don Schmidt. When you hear Don Schmidt talk about Roswell, Don Schmidt was the guy who went and in the 80s went to every single, tracked down as many witnesses as he could from Roswell and got them on videotape telling their story. A lot of these stories were secondhand of people who were there. Yeah, have the story, relayed that story to this person, and then that person is a person who's being recorded and is being taken down. Now, there was a TV show, and actually UFO Jen was part of it, where they had an AI run over all of these taped interviews, and the AI came to a determination whether or not this person was lying or this person was telling the truth in the recalling of their story. Most of them came back true. The one that was compelling was Jesse Marcel. They also ran the AI on him and his telling of the story, and all of them came back as telling the truth. The only thing I kind of found off with it was that, at least for most of the witnesses, again, these are secondhand stories, so maybe they're recalling the story. The story is true. The telling of that's what they were told, and that's what's true. But that doesn't necessarily mean the source of the story is true. I mean,
Right.
that's where
Yeah.
it kind of muddies there. But and also
hard
we
to
don't
tell.
know who programmed this AI. How
Sure,
do we?
yeah, and
there's
how
so
that
many
works.
questions
Yeah.
on that. But the thing that I find fascinating is when you listen to Don Schmidt talk about this,
Mhm.
he has a deep distrust for the American government and the Air Force,
That's
and
completely
yet,
understandable.
but at the same time, is completely bought in to a story that was perpetrated and propagated by the Air Force.
Isn't that interesting? I've noticed kind of a cultural shift in the UFO community. It used to be very trust no one, and nowadays there's a lot of pro government, which like
Yeah.
maybe that's good, but I don't know. I distrust the government quite a bit too.
Well, I think everyone should distrust their government.
Yeah,
But I think also, you get the government you deserve. So if you bring attention to your elected representatives on this topic,
Mhm.
I find that they're pretty responsive. And I think they're also
Mhm.
starting to see that from a political perspective. There's some juice to be kind of gained here.
That's the key, because
Yeah.
you break down Congress people and senators. They want to be reelected, and the way to be reelected is to appeal to the most common voter, right? So you want to show interest in this to them, because they might not believe in it. They might not give a shit about it at all. But if it means reelection, if it means keeping their seat, if it appears that they're representing their constituents, then yes, they'll still go along with it. So you can still use them as a tool. You don't even have to trust these guys, which I don't. But you can use them, which is nice. We elected them, and now they're there for us, right? That's usually not the case, but in this circumstance, yeah, flood their emails, tell them you love UFOs, look at UFOs, because then it becomes, if enough people do it, then it becomes part of their platform. So they're still pushing for it regardless of whether they personally buy into it or not. So yeah, they can be a tool.
Yeah, I think the shift in trust is, I think it makes sense, because for the longest time, the government was clearly lying to us about unidentified things in the sky. And now they're at least coming, true to us, saying that, yeah, there
Sure,
are
maybe
things that we can't explain.
Yeah.
And I think that shift is one of the most mysterious shifts, I think, in this discussion.
Well, you got to be careful with that too, because they know that's what you want to hear. So if they're trying to deliver something else, if they want you to think that, it's a pretty easy narrative for them to tell. Like, oh, look, guys, we're on your side now. Check out this UFO stuff. Oh yeah, we love UFOs. You know what I mean? Like, take it all.
There's a mystery behind that, regardless of what it is.
Yeah, reserve judgment. That's my greatest advice I can give everyone. Just you don't have to have a ride or die opinion on everything. You know what I mean? You don't have to die on each of these hills. Take everything with a grain of salt. Be open to everyone's interpretation of it. Within limits, and just be open. Reserve your judgment. Don't make a life or death opinion on anything like that. Just take in new information. So yeah, it's cool that they're doing this, whether it's a psyop or whether it's real or whatever. If there's other motivations too, still pay attention to it. Obviously, they're doing it for a reason, whether that reason is actually UFO and ET related or some kind of agenda. Keep your eye on it.
Hey, just FYI, guys, as soon as the KGRA DB show ends, stick around for after the show. We've got some announcements on the big phone home. We got some announcements on changes coming to the show. So if you're interested on what the show's going to be looking like here in the next month or so, stick around, because we've got some stuff coming. We got some stuff coming and stuff that's changing. So stick around and we'll be talking about that. So thank you, Jazz, for reminding me, even though that probably wasn't his intention. So no, I think everything that you said is very sound advice, and I think reserving judgment is something that both sides of this conversation are going to have to do, both the skeptics and the believers.
100%.
You have to reserve your judgment, because I have a feeling both sides are going to be really, really wrong on this.
Oh yeah,
insanely wrong, both sides. And I think that's what I saw, a little bit like, these skeptics like Mick West painting themselves into this corner because they feel really safe and confident in their position, and now I feel like they've now planned a way to get out of this painted corner, and they left this little sliver to sort of teeter, even though they're still very confident in their viewpoint. But I feel like like they've backed off just a little bit because I think they see all of the academics. And I'm wondering what the tipping point is for someone like Mick, who starts seeing Avi Loeb and Gary Nolan and Lex Fridman and the list goes on and on and on. All the different academics are starting to sign on board to at least start looking at this and having the conversation, not making any statements, not putting any flag in the sand, not drawing any lines, just saying, hey, we should look at this more. There's enough data here that it's worthy of pursuing. And he's got to be looking at that and going, all these guys can't be crazy or misinformed or wrong, right?
No, of course not.
Crazy for just even considering it.
The other thing is like, it's totally fine to be wrong. It's totally fine to believe that it is ET. Even, we can't conclusively say that. Like, who cares? Like, people are too worried about, dubs and L's on Twitter and getting into fights and stuff like that. Like, prior to when I was writing for the Skeptical magazine, Bent Spoon, I was kind of into ghost hunting, and I thought like that could be legit. I don't anymore. I think all the methodology is really flawed, but like, man, who cares if I believed in ghosts before? Like, what, are you gonna dunk on me for that? I don't care. People believe in lots of weird crap. Most people are superstitious one way or another about something. Even I am, and I know it's bullshit, but I still do it. It's like, who cares, man? You're not gonna like these people need to have like these intellectual wins over people as if it's important. Like it's made up internet points, and people are gonna forget next week.
If you convince other people that it's true, you're gonna make it more true. That's
right.
Not the case,
that has no bearing on it either. So believe in reptilians and Dulce or whatever. Like, that's cool, but like, except to the other people have different opinions, like people could like Mick West. He's pretty confident that this is a lot of misinterpretation and stuff like that among hoaxes. I think that he gives people a good amount of credit, and they are misidentifications of weird looking things. You know what I mean? Like, there's no fault in being mistaken either. You see Venus, and sometimes Venus does look really bright and weird when it's on the horizon. Like, if you think that's a UFO, even if you take a picture of it and post it to UFO Twitter, and Mick West comes in and he's like, that's Venus. Like, oh, okay. What would there's no like, what's the detriment to that? You'll be okay. Everyone's okay. Everybody put out their ideas. Let's work together. Let's stop these archetypes. Let's stop these labels.
Well, that's what I love about Mick right now, is that he's such when a video does come out, I wait for his analysis before I come to any conclusions. He does really good work. Like, that's the person I'm leaning on, because he's the only one doing it. There's no anecdotes with him. There's the math that he backs it up with, and it seems like to me, and I don't know, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. And Jazz Shaw says Lou and Nick don't believe in Bigfoot, so they're clearly not credible. I speak to the ghosts of Bigfoot regularly. But it seems like, well, I'm not totally closed off to it, but if I put myself in the Bigfoot corner, I'll be okay. If I turn out to be wrong on Bigfoot, I'll eat that L all day.
Sure, who cares?
Yeah,
right?
Who cares?
But I'm open to it. But anyway,
and it's the same thing on UFOs. If I'm wrong on UFOs, hey, I'll eat the L. But if I'm wrong on UFOs, that means that, at least for me, I think the next step in that would be, well, it's human. And if it's human tech, like, I still want to know about it. That's still fascinating.
What are they still? And what are they in each separate case? Like, we kind of look at this as UFOs are either hoax, misidentified, or a true UFO. But what the hell is that? And is that one thing? There's nothing to suggest that. Like 3 sightings in the last 70 years could be alien craft, sure. But then like 6 other sightings could have been something else, and something else weird. So let's look into that too. I really don't think there's one answer to all these things. And I think looking at it that way might kind of limit your perspective on it too. Take each one as an anomaly, and look at it each one on its own. Because I think a lot of people think that skeptics do this. They've looked at a couple cases, they've determined like, oh, this one was a hoax, this one was clearly misidentified as this, because that does happen to some old cases. People will find out like, oh, this is clearly what caused this sighting, and there's a general consensus. That only speaks to that case. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you see a lot of people react kind of extremely and reductionist, and kind of like it, where like say like, oh, this case, it turns out it was a drone, and you'll see responses like, oh, you're saying all UFOs are drones? No,
Right.
no, that's not what anyone is
Some
saying.
of them are.
Yeah.
Some of them are. Some of them aren't. Some of them
Mhm.
are. Yes. I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's everybody's gonna be right and absolutely so wrong on this, because it's
Yeah.
not gonna
Which
be
is
one
cool.
thing,
It's
which
cool.
is cool. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for more.
Mhm.
Catherine Splashington again with the comments says, I'll be offering a free foot massage at the Spaced Out Radio Las Vegas meetup this April. Be there.
Nice.
Anonymous Rex, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Truly appreciate it, my friend. Haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back. Bud Hopkins was my weed dealer's name in college.
Interesting. The Bud Hopkins.
I feel like that's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard that from somebody else before. That's funny.
Saul
And
Goodman kind of name.
exactly. And then Awaiting Alien says, excellent guest today. Great show. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for being
Thank you.
here. So real quick, I wanted to touch on just some current news because I thought it was interesting. And I know you guys haven't totally read this article, but it comes from our friend Daniel Otis over at Vice Magazine. And he's also working at the Canadian Broadcasting Network, if I'm not mistaken. I could have that station wrong, but I know he just got essentially a promotion. Daniel's going to be on our show next week, so we're going to go into a deep dive on this with him. But let me go ahead and share this with the audience, and I'll include this the link for this article in the description as soon as the show's over. Let's see, there it is. And for you guys listening out there in Radio Land, it is an article from Vice magazine, and it is, oh, that's not it. There we go. That is it. These are the 300 UFO or 500 pages of UFO documents. Hold on, let me get the other screen going here. Sorry, guys. Let me see here. Nope. This is always great radio. People listening to somebody trying to figure out the internet. Okay, here we go. So here are 20 years of UFO sightings we got from the Canadian government. That is the title of the article. And basically it's this: the Canadian government has released over 20 years of UFO reports. This is a 500 plus reports spanning nearly 300 pages and contains dozens of strange sightings from commercial pilots, soldiers, and police officers obtained by Vice World News through the Canadian Freedom of Information laws. The reports were made to federal transportation authorities as recently as last year, when the Canadian military flight spotted a bright green flying object that flew into a cloud, then disappeared over eastern Canada. Now, this is something that Daniel Otis, and he's Canadian. He's a Canadian journalist doing some really amazing work out of our friends from the north here. And he's been just hammering them with these FOIA requests, essentially. And what I found interesting, one of the more interesting things about where this information goes once it's collected, it goes to a private company, kind of like Bigelow Aerospace collects all of the UFO reports from the FAA. It's something similar, but the company has been around for a longer time. It's called Nav Air Canada, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see if I can find the actual quote here. Give me a second, guys. But that's where, yeah, okay. Shag. Here it is. So Vice World News acquired the documents last month via 2 separate access to information requests that were filed in April and September with Transport Canada, the government department that oversees aviation. Most were forwarded to the Transport Canada by the private company Nav Canada. Now, at this time, when Daniel Otis came on, he was sending these requests, but we were also tweeting at Nav Canada, and getting a whole bunch of retweets being like, yo, what's up, man? Give us some info. Never thinking that even Daniel Otis was like, yeah, I don't know if we're going to get anything out of these requests, out of these FOIAs, out of these tweets, but who knows? And then here we are in March, and they just released 20 years worth. 20.
Well, that's a decent distinction between NavCam and Bigelow. NavCam's releasing the documents.
Not only that, but
nice.
I think the biggest thing, and Nav Canada has a Twitter, and as soon as the show's over, I'm going to be tweeting them, and you're more than welcome to retweet, but a big thank you.
Yeah,
I think
it seems like just
show them the love. Just be like, thank you so much for being transparent with the last 20 years of data that you've collected.
Right.
Well, it seems unclear that Nav Canada was actually the releasing authority for this, right?
Yeah, they forwarded it to the Transportation Department of the Canadian government,
right.
and they released it. But at least they fully cooperated, right?
That's my point.
They are the ones who compiled it, right?
They're a private company that doesn't have to share a damn thing.
Yeah. Cool.
And
that's awesome.
That's awesome. Like that's awesome.
And it sounds like a really good resource to comb through to find some more of these more obscure cases that are actually really cool and deserve some spotlight. I know I'm gonna be digging into that for a while now too.
Well, I can tell you a lot of people are going to be digging into this in a while. Here's what's beautiful about it as well. 300 pages means that's 300 new pages of things to FOIA. And possibly get more information on, and who knows what that may lead from the American point of view, because a lot of these flights go from Canada to the US and vice versa. And that usually is handed off. I think he said anytime I can't remember. We got to clarify when he goes back, but I think it was something along the lines of, when the flight's transcontinental like that, it depending on what side and what flight it comes on, it could go to the FAA, and then from the FAA, I believe it goes to NORAD, or it could go to the Canadian version of the FAA, and then from there it goes to Nav Canada. So it kind of goes into this dark hole, and we never know. But here they are. Here they are being a little more transparent. I think hitting up Daniel Otis, hitting up Nav Canada, hitting up Vice Magazine, and just saying a thank you to all 3 of those entities for looking into it, providing some data and more clarity on this is so important. It encourages more companies. I mean, I look at this and I go, where you at? Where you at, Air Force? Where you at, FAA? Where you at, NORAD? Like, what's up? What's up?
Yeah, it shows that this stuff isn't national security concerns. They can release stuff like this, right?
Right.
I'm excited to see what there was around the Great Lakes area too, because the Great Lakes, because I'm a neighbor, and maybe there's some similar things to the cases I've looked at too. Maybe more water interaction.
Wouldn't shock.
Never know. It's definitely something to dig into. I'm pretty excited about it. That's cool.
No, it's. I mean, I think it's one of. It definitely got #UFO Twitter trending, this story.
Is that what it is? I've noticed that.
I'm pretty sure this is the story that got that trending.
Makes sense.
And it's a story that's kind of, I mean, not totally penetrating what's going on in the world right now, but it's got some traction in the discussion, because I think from a researcher's perspective, especially the John Greenwalds, the Stephen Greenstreets, the Daniel Otises, the Ross Coultharts, they're all going to dive into these 20 years worth of files, and I can't wait to what starts bubbling back from it, because that's
we haven't even got to the meat yet.
We haven't even got to the meat yet. Yeah. And by the way, there's a PDF as well. Yeah, I'll share the PDF with every single case that they reported on right now in the chat.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. Yeah. So check this out. It's a link to the PDF with all of the documents for the last 20 years. I just put it up right now. So go check it out for yourselves. You guys are more than welcome to look at these cases yourself. And I'm sure these are things that we'll be talking about here in the next few months for sure. And we'll we'll ask Daniel next week. And if you have any other questions about any cases that are in these files, bring them next week for the show with Daniel, because that's going to be a lot of fun.
Nice.
But yeah, so there's stuff happening. It's like, I feel like the summer's coming, right? Like like that summer UFO wave of information, and I feel like this is maybe the start of summer, you know. And I'm hoping we kind of what did UFO Jesus call last Jubilant June, you know? What was it? What did he call July? Anyway, but yeah, you know, it's always fun and awesome when stuff like this gets reported by serious journalists who don't cover just UFOs. So it's really cool. Well, Nick, dude, I gotta say, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show, man.
It was awesome.
You're this every conversation always surprises me. But this is kind of one of those conversations where I'm like, man, we should have you on here more, helping us decipher some of these things. You know, having a skeptic on board like you, that's not an asshole. It's always, I mean, everybody's got their moments, but I'm saying like it's got a nice feel to it. You know, like I always, you're open-minded, but not so open-minded that your brains are falling out. I love that. That saying. I can't remember who said it, but it's a good one. Red Panda Koala in the house says, "Great show, thank you." That's another filmmaker and an investigator that you guys should check out and go subscribe to. I'm sorry, did I cut somebody off? What were you gonna say?
I don't remember.
That's all right. Matthew Riot says, "All hail, Nick." I know you kind of went over what you're working on next. If I could give you an unlimited budget, what would be the thing you would tackle immediately?
Immediately quitting my job.
Well, no, that obviously that comes with the unlimited budget.
Yeah. No, I would finish the 66 flap of Michigan. And I would have my druthers and stretch it out quite long. I'd probably chop it up into multiple segments and stuff, but I would kind of take it into where it led with the Condon Report and stuff like that. And I'd probably do a little bit of prefacing with the Robertson panel too, and just kind of do UFO history. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of cool history and there's a lot of weird groups in the past and stuff like that. And I think a lot of the new people haven't seen much of it then. I think some new people coming onto the scene might have the impression that like, oh, these old cases from the 60s and stuff, like they clearly didn't amount to anything because we don't hear about them now, which isn't true. I mean, like a lot of them just haven't been looked at very thoroughly. Like there's really cool cases dating all the way back, and they're not all solved. They're not all debunked. They're not all bullshit. There's cool stuff. There's really cool stuff. That other case I mentioned, the Portage, Indiana police chase where Officer Dale Spower, I think his name is, chased it over state lines. Like multiple other cops were chasing it in their cars too. People ahead kind of called in ahead and spotted it. That happened. I want to say it was like a week or a month after the sightings in 66 in Michigan. That's another weird one. Like, well, I don't know what the hell he saw, but it's interesting. It's really interesting. In these cases, I mean, despite what Quintanilla and Blue Book kind of suggest, they aren't solved. I don't know that they necessarily can 100% certainly be solved. We can at least get close. You know what I mean? So let's look at these. Let's try to identify them. And when you see people looking at cases trying to identify them, don't take that personally. Don't make any case the hill that you die on. You know, if someone debunks your favorite case, like, you know, pour out a
Jazz
40,
did with the Japanese airline flight.
Yeah.
Oh man, that one stung.
I get that. I mean, I'd feel a little hurt if my case got debunked tomorrow, but like, greater good, you know, that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing too, for sure. Yeah.
So real quick, if you can, in a minute or less, I am curious on your your sort of view on the last couple of, I'd say, month of Lou Elizondo, his interviews. Is there anything that you've sort of pulled from there? What do you think of that? Of
I
that
haven't been
whole
listening.
situation? Oh, you haven't been listening. Great.
I haven't been keeping
Probably
up
saved
with the
yourself
news.
yeah.
Yeah.
Probably saved a lot of Twitter headaches. Not listening to anything.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I get in my fair share, but like
Mm.
with these cases, I take such a deep dive. I don't want other cases influencing me unless they're directly related. You know, I want, and like I said, I try to go into each one fresh too. You know what I mean? So like, envelop yourself in that case, but just that case. So I haven't been following all this contemporary stuff within the last year, because it does seem to draw attention and arguments and heated moments and stuff like that, because the Twitter kind of facilitates these parasocial relationships, you'll notice, and there's a lot of putting people on pedestals and a lot of demonizing people and a lot of either or, and none of that's healthy.
Right.
none of it. So yeah, don't idolize people in the UFO field. Listen to them, sure. Listen to everybody. Listen to everybody's opinions. Reserve your judgments. Draw your own conclusions. Stuff like that, and dig up some more old cases. Everybody, there's so many. There's millions of cases. Check them out. There are tons of cool ones out there still to be discovered, and I think it's worthwhile.
Right on. Well, Nick, it was an absolute pleasure. Before you get out of here, please tell everyone where they can find your stuff and interact with you if they choose to on social media.
Typically on YouTube. I'm Invisible Night School on YouTube. That's where everything is going to be posted from them. And I'm sure you guys can post a link in the chat.
Yep, it's in the description and the chat as well.
I'm always on UFO Twitter, and I am always up for an argument. So get at me. No, I'm just kidding. No, let's actually work together. As fun as arguing is, let's kind of come together and identify some unidentified things.
Right on. Awesome. Well, dude, I can't thank you enough. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely.
And getting your take on things, because I think it's a nice breath of fresh air.
Good. Well, thanks.
All right, my friend. We'll see you soon. Thank you. Yep. Absolutely. Yep. Ciao.
See you, Nick.
Well, that's the week, you guys. That's the week.
Yeah, fun week, fun show.
It was a fun week, very fun show. Man, this show's always fun. Before we get out of here, of course, want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all the tunes you hear on the show. Want to say thank you to Bill backstage from KGRADB. Our show is there every Friday from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This show will be available on iTunes in about an hour. So if you're on the road, if you want to listen to this in the office, please do. Leave us a rate and review. It goes a long way to making sure that the podcast continues to grow. Thank you so much to the Patreon members out there. Love you guys to death. Thank you to the future Patreon members. Thank you to the super chats that we had today. Absolutely unbelievable. YouTube memberships, you guys are awesome with the dollars. If you can't support with a dollar, don't sweat it. This show is 1 billion% free. All of it. The Discord, the podcast, this show, you don't have to pay for any of it. But just please like, share, subscribe. Help us make the show grow if you think it's fun. If you've made it this far, we truly appreciate it. Thank you to the moderators. Thank you to everyone in the chat. Links for Invisible Night School, Nick Coffin. Links for all the videos and the things we discussed are in the description below, so go check it out. And that's it, you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. Again, if you're on YouTube, stick around for a couple minutes. We'll be going over a couple of changes that are coming to the show. We'll go over these changes, I'm sure, again sometime soon, so the KGRADB audience will figure it out. Nothing crazy happening, but there are some changes coming. So with all of that out of the way, appreciate you guys out there in the radio land. Be safe. We love you. Peace.
Oh, Lou.
All right. Look at Rather. He's taking off his tie. I think we're still live, Rather.
We're still live.
Put the
Yeah.
tie on, Rather.
What's happening
What's
here?
happening? All right, you guys. So, okay, as you may or may have not noticed, we're missing one of our core team members the last couple of months, and that is, of course, Michael Mataluni, the beloved Mataluni. I miss him to death. So Mataluni has obviously moved into a new house, and his priorities have shifted tremendously, especially with his business that is growing at an exponential rate. So much so that I may even be helping him out with that business on some levels here in the next month or so. But it means that he can't be here. Not forever. He's going to come back for some of our bigger interviews. I'm pretty sure he'll be here for Lou Elizondo. He'll be here for the Big Phone Home 3. We're planning like I said, a live show. I'm going to be putting together those details here in the next couple of weeks. But that also means there's a couple of reasons he's doing this. Obviously, the business end of things, but there's also just this aspect of UFO Twitter being absolutely draining on the soul. Like, like this Twitter mob has taken some of the love out of this for us as a team. Like, it just truly has. Like, it's been kind of an uphill battle. And because of that, I think that some of the direction for the show is going to focus more on the science, the political discussion around this UAP phenomenon. Not to say that we won't be diving into the woo or aspect of it, or the parapsychology aspect of it, or the CE5 aspect of it, but we're just not going to be diving into it as much anymore, because honestly, it's just given us mostly headaches. We've tried our best to understand this part of the conversation and be as open-minded as we can, but as far as I can tell, it's very difficult to get that side of the conversation in a lab to measure it. That's the first problem with it. The second problem with it is that I can't take it to the desk of a senator and convince a senator, and I'll just use my own personal experience on that. Like, I can't take my personal experience and put it on the desk of a senator and say, proof, there you go. There's all the proof you need. The history of this topic is also something that it's as rich as it is, it's so dense and so information packed that, again, it's not something that a senator has the time to sit down and consume. And so what can we do to forward the conversation to get this more in the political format, more into the scientific discussion? And so that's where these conversations are going to start switching. We are doing a show 3 days a week. We've been doing a show at least 3 days a week, sometimes up to 5 for now, almost a year. And I don't want to burn out Rather. I don't want to burn out. I've already burned out Michael. Michael's already burned out. I don't want to burn out Jane. All of us have lives. All of us have different responsibilities. Thankfully now Los Angeles is starting to open up more. I've been acting more. I've been doing more improv shows, and I want to make sure that I am as available for those things as possible. And doing a show 3 days a week makes it very, very difficult to do anything outside of the show. I'm booking 16 guests a month. That is
a lot behind the
crazy.
scenes that you do, Lou.
And I've been doing it. We've been doing it now for almost a year. And so I've gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, I think we need to cut back. We could cut back on some of these shows, and put more focus and energy in making sure that the guests we have are as the highest caliber as we can get them, and also the conversations we have, and also just being able to produce other segments and other things. Like we were doing UFO video of the day. We're going to be bringing that back. We're going to be bringing back, Rather does videos almost weekly, or bi-weekly. And so, essentially bringing on Rather and interviewing Rather and his research and what he's doing, like really focusing on the scientific aspect of this conversation, still taking the topic seriously, still not taking ourselves seriously. Not a whole lot is going to change from the show perspective. It's going to be pretty much the exact same show. We're just going to be doing it 1 day a week. We're going to be, as of right now, tentatively for Fridays, that day could change, so stay tuned as far as the day is concerned. But the beautiful thing is that we'll mostly be doing one show a week, but if big news breaks, or if for example, the Hunt for Skin, the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch season 3 is coming out, we love doing the reviews of that. We're going to be having guests from the ranch and investigators that were on the ranch coming on the show for that. And those shows be an hour long or 45 minutes. If we could get the review done in that time, we'll get it done in that time. If it goes for 2 hours, then it goes for 2 hours. But it's not like a regular show like we normally do. So even at one show a week, you guys will still be getting a lot of amazing free content. I'm sure this will probably shut up a lot of people who hate our show, and this will probably, I hope it doesn't frustrate the people who love our show, because those people far outnumber the people who hate the show, and that's who we make the show for. That's who we're here for, you guys. But we also want to provide the best show possible. And if I could pay Jane, if I could pay Michael salaries where they could keep their houses and their mortgage and not work for the companies they work for and do this full time, then we'd be doing three shows a week. No problem. Because or more, but that's just not the case. And I think that this team, especially Rather and Michael and Jane, and people behind the scenes like Aaron Desario and our producer Alex Garcia, there's so much stuff that they do behind the scenes, and I just don't want to burn them out. I don't want they've done so much. To be here 3 days a week is difficult. At the same time, every time, it's a miracle we went this long without killing each other. Like, there's no animosity. Michael's not mad at anybody. He's a busy guy. And
there might be some people on UFO Twitter he's mad at. Let's be honest.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I'm saying within our team, like this is not the Beatles breaking up or anything like that. Michael will still be part of the show, just a lot less, and that bums me out, and that bums Rather out. There's nothing I am gonna miss the hell out of Michael, and I think that also goes for his Singularity Lab shows. I think those are also going to be cut back because, again, he's got a family to take care of, and who's going to sit here and argue with that? I don't pay anybody. I can't demand anything from any of these people. The fact that they've been so gracious with their time and their research and their efforts and their good hearts, like I think. I think it's only fair to not only us, but to our audience that we do the best show as possible. And so if cutting back 2 shows a week is going to help us do that, I think you guys will appreciate it. We'll be able to do more things. Like, for example, we're going to do a clips version of this show. So we'll have, like UCR clips. And so those will be a lot more shareable. And I'll be able to edit those. There'll be more time for me to find higher caliber guests. Not to say that our guests are not high caliber. I think we've had an amazing guest list, and a lot of the guests that you've seen on the show will be coming back. So that's the big change that's coming to UCR. Now that'll be happening probably mid-April. From here to the end of March, regular show as usual, and then in the first 2 weeks of April, we're taking two weeks off. I haven't had a week off from this show in almost 2 years. Even during Christmas, when everybody had a break, I was sitting here doing a live stream every day. They were replays, but I still had to be here. I still had to produce the show at a certain time. So those are the changes coming to the show. Again, nothing huge, but just want to give you guys the heads up and just be as transparent with you guys as possible. And then we've also got, so there's a couple of things we're planning. First, I think we're definitely going to be sending Rather to the APC conference, right? In Alabama. Yeah, so Rather's going to be going there reporting live. I don't know if we'll be able to get him live, but hopefully Rather will be able to get some interviews, and if not, maybe nail down some guests for future episodes, and we'll have boots on the ground in Alabama at this conference, which I think is really cool. And so, rather will come back and tell us about the conference. We've got, let's see, what else do we got? What else was I working on? Oh, yes, the Big Phone Home 3. The Big Phone Home 3. So I'm working on that right now, working on getting guests. I think the guests are going to be amazing for the Big Phone Home 3. It's going to be a lot less I have to say that the phone homes were chaotic. I think the panels will be smaller. It'll be more intimate, I think is the best way to put it. The panels will be a lot more intimate and a little longer so that the conversation can grow. And we can get perspectives going back and forth as opposed to just talking. Let's see here. And then also I'm going home sometime either in April or in the summer, and I'm going to be working on a little mini documentary of my own, my experience that I had in Florida. I'm going to be going back and filming that and trying to find as many eyewitnesses from that story as I possibly can and getting them on film and talking to them and then editing a little whatever comes out of it. I don't really have any plans for it, but we'll see what happens. So those are some of the projects we're working on. We're also working on a live show. I've been teasing this for a while. That looks like it might be going down in May. But again, I need a couple of weeks to solidify a venue and get the details for that. And then also solidify if people can make it up. There's a lot of moving parts to a live show. But the idea is to get Rather here in Los Angeles, Michael here in Los Angeles, do a live show on stage in front of a live audience where you guys could come. And I'm hoping to get someone, like Lou Elizondo, if the schedule works, or, a Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall, or Reese Darby, who's got a new show that's coming out on Cinemax. So there's a lot of people that we're reaching out to. None of these people have confirmed yet. I'm just saying these are the folks that we're kind of pitching the idea to. So we'll see what happens, but that'll be super exciting. And it'll also give us an opportunity to meet not only just me and Rather and Michael, but meet you guys, the audience out there, the people who love this show. So I think that's it. Did I miss anything, Rather?
I think you covered it all. It's exciting times ahead.
Exciting times ahead. Yeah, don't let this be sad news. This will be good news. And like I said, you guys, when breaking news happens, we'll be doing a live stream. Like we'll be talking.
Be sure
about
to subscribe.
Be sure to subscribe.
Schedule might get a little hectic.
Yeah, make sure you ring that bell because I think summer's going to be busy, and who knows, it could turn out we're doing 5 shows a week if it calls for it, right? So the point is that for sure 1 show a week, and then sprinkle in some bonus content here and there that again we're going to keep 100% free for you guys. There's no intention of monetizing any of this content that we create for you guys. If you support the show, it's because you love the show, not because we're trying to give you early access and get you to pay a monthly subscription to listen to something 4 days early or whatever it is, or behind a paywall, even worse, or selling you a movie about places we've never been and things we've never seen, and telling you their facts. So a lot of cool stuff. I'm excited. I hope you guys are too.
Me too.
If you have any questions at all, or if there's anything that you guys think you can help out with, please hit us up on Twitter. We're always looking for people to help out with the show in little ways. So, hit us up if you guys are interested in that. And I think that's everything. Michelle, my girlfriend, had a donation here. Let me see if I can find it. I have it up here on a thing. I just want to put it up on the screen.
Gotcha.
Let's see what she says. I just love what why do you give me money, babe? It's like, it's so funny. Where is it? Oh, you got it. You put it up, man. I'm lost. Anyway, she says, here's the UCR evolving in 2022, only up from here. So yeah, I hope you guys dig the new changes. I think some of the new segments and ideas that we're playing around with, you guys are going to really enjoy. So I'm excited. I'm excited to also have a little bit of time off. Like I've gained so much weight sitting in this chair. It's time to I have no time to do anything outside of this, man. And I've got to somehow squeeze in like regular work hours in there. So it's been tough, man. But I enjoyed every second of doing this show for you guys. So this is not us getting sick of this or being burnt out. This is just us putting more of a realistic,
more sustainable. Give us more time.
More sustainable.
Think of cool stuff to do.
Exactly. What's the saying? Quality over quantity, right?
There you go. Yeah.
So that's I think that's sort of the new mantra or one of the new mantras of the show. But with all that said, rather have a good weekend. I miss you, buddy.
You too.
We've got a killer lineup for the show next week. I'll go over that real quick with you guys before we get out of here. Let me tell you. I know for sure we got Daniel Otis coming on. We were going to have Ted Rowe on Wednesday, but he had to move his conversation to a later date. So I think we'll have Jazz Shaw, and then we got Nathan from Calling All Beings on Monday. So that'll be cool. And then the next week is going to be huge. Or excuse me, wait a second. No, so next week, Daniel Otis is not coming on next week. Excuse me. On Friday, we're going to be having Terrace Matla, Chris Bartell, Susan Fenston, and Peter Robbins doing a UFO art club curation. So that'll be really cool. And we'll be advertising that all week. See if we can get Alex Dietrich. Maybe she can pop in because I know she's really into the UFO art club. So who knows? Maybe we could get her to watch the show. I think it'll be really cool. I mean, Terrace Matla, University of Maryland curator for the museum and exhibits there. Chris Bartell was a security guard and photographer of Skinwalker Ranch for, I think it was 5 or 6 years. Susan Fenston helped produce Beavis and Butthead. Peter Robbins worked very closely to, was it Bud Hopkins, the painter? So, 4 amazing artists in themselves, and they're going to be coming on and helping us break down all the art that is in this community, which is a lot of stuff. So that'll be fun. But anyway, you guys don't want to talk your ear off, want to get Rather out of here. Rather, you going to be at Discord tonight?
I don't think I'll be able to make it today, unfortunately, but hate everyone there.
I kept you a little longer. I'm going to try to make Discord here in the next 15-20 minutes, and I'll come hang out with you guys. So if you haven't checked out the Discord, it's free. Link is in the description. You guys can come up and ask us questions. But all right, Rather, I love you. Get out of here. We'll see you guys soon. Peace. I'm going to tell you all right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom! You're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support.